Welcome to my second tips and techniques presentation on data serialization, going deeper into JSON. In the previous data serialization demonstration video, we mentioned parsing data that it can convert bytes of data into an object. There are two types of JSON data to worry about: JSON object to store data, and JSON array if you need to store a collection of JSON objects into an array. JSON arrays are useful to organize a bunch of JSON objects to uh, one part of data. While working on saving records, when testing and making sure to validate your JSON structure while in the development stage, it is useful to quickly debug which part of your JSON structure is messed up. When the structure becomes more complex and massive, this tool can be invaluable to check for inaccuracies and be a part of your toolkit to catch small mistakes or typos in your JSON structure. JSON-lint is an example of a resource where you can check your structure for JSON validation. Instead of solely focusing on pros and cons over the types of data from last video, I want to keep it helpful for people getting into JSON, providing the best and bad practices to avoid for your structure for getting into JSON. Some of the best practices for JSON is to maintain your structure using validation, like how I mentioned in the previous slide. Also making sure your structure is clean for future tense, keeping it simple, and as it's getting more complex, so you can also make that easily manageable between yourself and a group. Keeping a consistent agreed upon naming convention to avoid confusing yourself and others based on variables and key values. Use JSON array for chunks of data to make it easier to manage. Also making sure, going back to the last slide, making sure there's no inconsistencies in validation with quotations or name conventions or any sort of issues, to make sure that you have clean JSON structure to avoid bad practices. I am going to import the JSON library to the project and import the savable interface, since they'll be using the same logic as the previous demonstration. For my demonstration, I'll be making a to-do list project where you can create as many tasks that you'd like to set up and to put as to do and to save as you like. And we'll be saving this into a JSON array. Also, I will already have implemented a simple getting and setting logic for the task name, the task description, and task status. And I'm going to comment on my task status indicator so I can show a little bit of how I have that set up for my toString. Also, I'll set up a switch case menu options to create, show, edit, or remove task for later functionality. I am setting up the prompts to create the task variables inside the create task object function so that I can configure the different task variables into different functions, so I can reuse the functionality for editing specific variables from the task object later on. Before I start working inside of the saving class, I will set up an array list for the task class, for the tasks, and the savable interface. Logic wise, I can add the task array list into the savable array list and then break down the objects into the save system. And this will be modular, where I can add as many array lists as I want into the savable array list for the system, so that it is highly scalable. First, in the save system class, I'm going to set up the reference for the file directory first. Instead of passing through a reference of the savable interface inside of the saving, like the last demonstration, we will pass through objects that are inside of the savable interface array list from our main class. Also, I'm setting up the keys for saving and loading for the to JSON and from JSON and the class key. The for loop checks the instance of class objects of the objects, then add them to the wanted JSON array that you would like, and I used the to-do list key for my JSON array. If there's any task objects inside of it will check if there is any task objects inside of the to-do list JSON array that add the JSON array key. Lastly, for saving, I will write the file if I can find JSON file in the directory, and add checks if there is an issue with reaching the file. For loading, we'll pass through the class you want to load, which is the task class for this demonstration. Set up the JSON parser and JSON object for game data to read the file inside of the file reader. Since we'll be using the same key for the JSON array list, let's create a constant reference to avoid any mistype errors or issues while loading or saving the JSON array. Inside of the file reader, we will create a task object and set the task data from the JSON object function. Then add the task objects into the array list inside the main class. We load at the beginning of the main class when we start at beginning of running. Inside of our save function in our main class, we need to clear the save data list to avoid duplicate objects. Then all of your array list, then add all of your array lists into the save data array list before referencing the save function from the save system class. Then you'll be good to save wherever you'd like to add, edit, or remove a task for the in the to-do list. We finished our saving system functionality. We're showing the amount of tasks we can check. If we can check the to-do list is empty, we can return, then run a for loop to display each object. This will be useful to deciding when we want to check, remove, or edit our tasks. So we will keep reusing the show task function in most of our choices, in most of our menus. Remember, this will display the object based on what we have set up in our toString function inside of the task class. Before we can edit a task, then use the make task variable functions. I will set up a while loop to force the user to be able to choose a valid task object. Also, I will use the to-do list, check if the to-do list is empty. I will reuse this logic inside the remove task function also. I will pass the object into the edit task function and use a menu to pick which task variable the user would like to edit. I tweaked the text displays for the uh, print logs to help the user to be able to see more, and I added an adjusted space for readability. I added the last also added the last logic for removing task to remove the task object from the to do list array list. Also, I'm about to end up hitting an issue where I'm not able to create my task object. Before I cut, I want to make sure I keep in this part, so the areas where I tweak that are still necessary for functionality, I want to be able to showcase, so it's not missing to follow along for this demonstration. Sorry for the cut, but I figured out the issue where I ended up forgetting to add the task into the to-do list array. So I wasn't creating the task property, so that's why it wasn't showing in the menu. And it wasn't saving to the system. Another issue I about I found out too is that I forgot to add the .json format into the file name inside of the saving system. Instead, it was saving to the .text file instead of a .json. Here are some resources that I used to help me to create this video. Thank you. I hope you liked this video and my demonstration, and I hope that you thought that this was informative. Thank you.